Hi, David Kirsten here with the Run and Gun video show. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics in all of videography and photography: why use vintage lenses on modern cameras. And as you see from some of my earlier blog posts, I really think vintage lenses are a hidden treasure of videography and photography. And I almost use vintage lenses more than I do modern lenses. Obviously, it depends on what you're working on. So today I'd just like to talk about just kind of an intro to vintage lenses and take a look at a few here. And then after that, we're going to look at how to adapt to your modern camera. And then we're going to look at some images. And I'll try to move quick here. So today we got really some of the most famous lenses for photographers. The Super Tacumar Asahi Pentax, made in Japan. This lens actually has a radioactive front on it. There's a little yellowish tint, so it's very famous. It's actually on a lot of people's list for the bokeh. You can look up, serial numbers to see this. This is one of the 55 millimeter f1.8. So it's a very, fairly fast lens, especially for its time. And, this one's in very good condition. I got it for about $50. And, I would we'll take a look at some images. It does have the screw mount, the M42 mount, which is the most common mount for vintage lenses. There's a lot of different mounts, but this is a great one to get because the adapter isn't that long to put it on your, say, Sony camera. But, the ergonomics on this lens are just phenomenal. So, I'd say really, in short, why use vintage lenses? Price. You can get them for a fraction of what modern lenses cost. Quality. In my opinion, a lot of these lenses are even better, or better for the most part, than modern lenses because of the unique look and the character, micro contrast. What you're paying for here, you're getting a lot more of those qualities. Also, the ergonomics cuts both ways. I'd say these are about the best ergonomics I've seen out of a vintage lens. Just buttery smooth focus ring. Very light for a modern DSLR. The adapter doesn't add that much to your, that's what you're looking at. Basically the same as a modern lens, maybe a little bit heavier. But, in terms of cons, things you got to be aware of are the condition of the lens. Because some of these lenses are 50 years old, this one's probably about, could be close to 50 years old, maybe 40 years old. Scratches, there can be fungus in there, if it was kept in a moist climate. So you could have sticky aperture where the aperture doesn't quite work all the way, or the focus ring could be stiff because the grease is old. So these are things. eBay has a great policy for people who sell these lenses, for the most part, know all these issues, and they clarify that. And if they break kind of their word, eBay lets you return it, or they'll return it just to save their rating. Cons: some of these lenses aren't as sharp as the modern lenses. But really it's kind of a myth in photography, or especially videography, about sharpness. Sharpness is highly overrated. It's really about micro contrast. Sharpness does matter, but some of these lenses weren't rated for the same, say a new 100 megapixel sensor. They're not rated for that type of sensor on the new GFX 100 that's coming out. The last con, although it's part of a plus, is that some of them can have a fairly heavy vintage look. I'd say a lot of them, you can almost pass them off as a modern look, but they're almost like a hybrid. So you really have to kind of do your research, try them out. It also matters about what sensor you're putting them on, what conditions you're in. So anyway, the rest of these lenses are pretty much the same as this Takumar. You know, they are fully manual, which I didn't even put as a con because I actually like that better. So you have to control the aperture and to control how much light gets in, and then manual focus. But you know, once you start doing that to really be serious in videography or even photography, you gotta be doing everything manual anyway. You know, and then you do use autofocus at times depending on what it is, but you know, all manual is fine, I'd say, for 80% of what you do. You know, portraits, some of that eye focus that Sony's new cameras can be very useful, but we'll cover that in another video. I'm going to come back to my surprise lens at the very end. I was just going to show you quickly how to mount this on a modern camera. You just take a screw mount adapter and just screw it on there, and then screw it into your Sony camera, and you're ready to shoot. So we'll take a look at some lenses, but just manual focus. I'm just turning the focus ring. I'm a little close, too close focus distance. Okay, the surprise guest that you've been all waiting for is actually probably the most famous vintage lens, I would say without a doubt, given the amount of attention. It's not necessarily the best, you know, that's completely subjective, but I would say if you're going to start somewhere, the Helios is where most people start and is an excellent choice. It's actually based on a Carl Zeiss Biotar, which is, you know, another probably one of the most famous vintage lenses. This lens you can get on eBay for about 50 or 60 bucks in good condition. There were a lot of them made. So this is actually made in Russia, and a copy of the Carl Zeiss lens, which, you know, they didn't abide by those patent rights as you do in the West. Image quality is good. It's known for its swirly bokeh, which we'll look at in the flares too. So you really got to do some experimenting with this. Check it out online. There's tons of videos. Cons, you know, wide open. It's not as sharp as, you know, some people like, but I think that's actually good for portraits. But it is an f2. A very fast lens, especially for the time. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this look at vintage lenses.